Excellent. Yeah. So, you know, you talk initially, you spoke about, all of the, because one of our fellow professors made a statement on a roundtable discussion about a month ago, where he said, previously in my executive role, supply chain management was an expense, right?
Mm.
He said, now it's a competitive advantage.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah.
So, and that one hit me, right? I was like, dang, I've never heard of that. So that was an excellent point. I wanted to share that one with you. And I think that what I struggle with, from within academia, is getting more people to go into this industry, to go into this branch, because they don't know about it. They don't know about it. So how do we spread the word?
Yeah.
I ask everybody that question because I don't have the answer.
This is, let's dial the clock back to prior to this disruption. We had an economy that was clicking along at a fairly good pace.
Yes.
Supply chain was responding, oftentimes with same-day deliveries on almost just a myriad of products. Individuals were becoming much more comfortable with e-commerce, albeit we've had a crash course in it, because of the pandemic. But on the employment side, for every job that was available, for every 6 jobs that were available in supply chain, we had 1 qualified candidate. So we had a gap prior to the disruption. Based on our research, we indicated that there would be a shortfall of 2 million supply chain workers by 2025. This was prior to the disruption. Now we're seeing a significant challenge, not only on senior leadership, but also on entry level, and warehousing, logistics, distribution. There's a significant demand for those, knowledge workers that can enable organizations to respond to spikes in demand and shifts in utilization. But more importantly, to your point, we need to engage individuals at an earlier time to get them interested in this field as a career. Unfortunately, most individuals that enter this field do so second or third year, fourth year in their schooling and their academic programs. They rarely enter a university or college curriculum saying, I want to go into supply chain. Oftentimes it's engineering or finance that they start off on, and then obviously the same foundation for supply chain is within those domains as well. So they find it fairly easy. But here's the challenge that we have. First, awareness of supply chain. I think we're seeing an increase of it, but yet we need to encourage more individuals through STEM programs, as well as through middle school and high schoolers, to get them aware and interested in the impact that supply chain can have with robotics, artificial intelligence.
Yes.
I mean, this is a dynamic field. Yes. So that's first. Secondly, we need to increase our diversity and inclusion within this industry. We do not have enough role models for women. We do not have enough role models for people of color. We do not have enough role models for diversity within the supply chain field. Let's peel the onion a little bit as to why that is. If we go back to the mid-90s, there were probably half a dozen to a dozen programs in the world that had a supply chain baccalaureate or a master's degree. This was not a field that had a strong academic foundation. Fast forward to 2015, over 500 programs across the globe, either baccalaureate or master's degrees. So we know the recognition of supply chain. Well, let's take a look at hiring, which is a key metric for schools. Over 90% placement rate for supply chain professionals, starting salary second only to engineers. We just did our salary survey. An associate's degree in supply chain, $68,000 median salary. With a baccalaureate degree, $77,000. With a master's degree, over $90,000. This is median salaries. This is not the top end.
Right.
Right. The midpoint for salaries. So what that's telling us is that organizations are paying these individuals because of the contribution they're making to their organizations. It's because they're making them more profitable. It's making them more efficient and effective as an organization. But we need more individuals within this field, and specifically on diversity. We need more women. We've done a study for the past 3 years with the National Association of Manufacturers, as well as Deloitte, about women in supply chain. Our latest salary survey indicated that there's salary parity during the hiring, and so early entrants into supply chain, women and men are equal in pay, which is great news. What's not great news is that the longer the women stay in supply chain, the greater the pay disparity. After 5 years and after 10 years, it gets to be almost 20% pay disparity between men and women doing the same jobs.
Really?
And so we've got some challenges within our industry, albeit we have a huge demand, a huge need for supply chain professionals. There is a population out there that we need to embrace and bring them into our tent, as it were, to see that there is an opportunity and a career opportunity where they can make a difference and have a rewarding, and more importantly, they can contribute.
All right. I love that answer, because that's something that I mean, I try to spread the word as much as possible from a higher education perspective. And whenever I share my stories, you know, they say, you traveled the world and got paid for it? I said, there's a demand for it. I mean, we can't find enough people. I always say, there's not many of us around.
Yeah.
Right? There's not many of us compared to general business, right? Business administration undergraduates, graduates, you know, MBAs.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a big need, and again, I just think that it's all about spreading the word, spreading education. Again, like you said, bringing in that diversity, and you put in an excellent point in that there's going to be a need for people leaving the industries. You know, those frontline workers, they're retiring in the next couple of years.
Yep.
Right. And when I talk about industrial automation, you know, those in industry say, oh, they're going to take jobs away. I said, there's going to be a reliance on industrial automation because
knowledge
there's so many
workers
people in the industry.
Yep.
You know, so that's where the engineers come in. That's where you integrate supply chain and manufacturing within those STEM programs. And I think that, you know, it's not that trend. It's here.
Yep.
It's here. Robotics.
Absolutely. And it's also the training that organizations commit to. And I think this is where I've been pleasantly surprised. The disruption in 2008, 2009, that was a demand issue. Demand just across the globe flattened. And so we saw significant displacement of workers. And my concern at that point is, if you ask any employer, what's their number one asset? What would their response be? People. If your number one asset, any organization, what did they consider their number one resource? People. Right. When do you, if you're going to do asset rationalization, okay, we're going to talk supply chain talk right now. If we're rationalizing our investments, where do you invest? In your best performing asset or your worst performing asset?
Yeah,
obviously your best performing asset. Yeah. Well, if your employees are your most critical aspect in an organization, you should invest in them when times are good and when times are bad.
Right.
Not just when the economy is going. And unfortunately, what we saw in the recession in 2008, 2009 was almost every organization cut professional development or participation with associations for their employees. Organizations need to walk the talk. If you're going to tell me that your employees are the most critical asset that you have and you're concerned about them, and going back to the Tyson example, then walk the talk.
Right.
Your actions need to be consistent with your statements. And more importantly, as we've seen through the last disruption, that was not consistent. In this particular pandemic, I was really surprised that every company that we had under contract to do training, not one company canceled their training. They postponed them. They indicated, you know what, we're good. We're dealing with a significant issue right now. We just need to delay. I am hopeful that organizations have learned that professional development is not a binary switch that you just turn on and off when the economy is going well, that your investment in your employees is consistent, irrespective of market conditions.
Right.
And more importantly, employees need to stay with those employers that invest in their careers. Too often we see, because of the demand, as you just indicated, for supply chain workers, employees often jump at the chance to get a higher salary, even if it's like 5 or 10%, without realizing that the organization that just paid for their professional development and or their certification cares about their careers.
Right.
If an organization is willing to poach you, they're willing to replace you.
Right.
And so this is part of the challenge that we have. And oftentimes we have employers tell us, why do I train them? I'm going to lose them. If I train them, they're going to get poached. And, you know, our response is fairly straightforward. And that is, you're right. You may lose them. But the flip side of that is, if you don't train them, they're going to stay. which would you rather have? Would you rather have a workforce that is, ill-equipped and doesn't have the requisite competencies to accomplish the task, but they're going to stay with you so you don't have to worry about turnover?
Right.
Or would you rather invest in your team and show them, and more importantly, as I said on the other side, is that we're encouraging employees stay with those companies that do invest in your career. Those are the ones that care about you. It is a 50-50 relationship between the employee and the employer. We need the passion and the commitment from the employee. We need the structure and the competency and the compensation from the employers.
Okay, great. All right, so two final things. So I do want your, I guess, your elevator pitch in terms of your certification offerings.
Yeah.
And also I want to ask, is there anything else you would like to discuss or add regarding corporate social responsibility and developing ethical supply chains?
Let's go to the salary first, and a little bit of plug for our organization. For individuals in the supply chain field, as we had just discussed about baccalaureate and master's degrees, while there is a significant increase in the number of them, organizations and schools that have been in the industry for a while have recognized this for a long time. So this is not new to those organizations. What we're seeing is that there is a significant demand for supply chain professionals at the academic setting, but employers are starting to question the value of a baccalaureate versus a credential in the field right now, and whether one and or both or either are more effective for their employees and for their hiring. What we've seen is that those individuals that do have a baccalaureate degree obviously out-earn their counterparts who don't have a baccalaureate degree. But more importantly, we're seeing indications or data that individuals that have a certification outperform their counterparts by 20%. If you have an APICS certification, it's almost 25%. And so it does matter. The employers do recognize that certification does make a difference on the competency of the individual. And more importantly, I would just ask the listeners, if you want to know what employers are considering as qualified certifications, look at the job ads in terms of the certifications that are either preferred or required for jobs. That'll give you a pretty good indication as to what employers are looking for. But I will say that we need to do a better job with the HR departments in identifying the competencies necessary for supply chain professionals. Too often individuals are being identified as supply chain professionals with 6 or 8 hours of classrooms in a supply chain program and calling themselves a supply chain professional. I think we need a little bit better evaluation process for the competencies necessary for employers. We have, based on our last study, employers are identifying a couple of critical areas where their candidates are underweighted. And that is first in critical thinking, that they are not able to evaluate or discern a problem statement or a situation and to identify what are the key problems. The second is the real world experience. Oftentimes they have book or more on the academic side as opposed to the real world experience. And this challenges me a little bit because I challenge the company, do you have an internship program? Do you have mentorship programs? And they say no. And I said, well, so you expect an employee to get training somewhere else and then you can hire them. What about developing a mentorship program? How about an internship program for schools? Work with the schools in your community. Identify opportunities for those employees or those students to see you, and then you get to see them. There are ways that we can encourage employees and employers to get better in terms of the hiring. A couple of areas where we're overweighted in the competencies, technology. Technology outpaces everything that we have. We're not scratching the surface on the utilization of the technology that we have. And so the other one is the reliance on algorithms and formulas. It's over-reliant on it. You put together where you're underweighted and where you're overweighted. Well, you're underweighted on critical thinking, but you're overweighted on algorithms and technology. It's a really bad mix. Of not understanding what the situation is, but having a technology solution where you don't apply to the right problem. And so we're seeing that the competencies and the expectations for employees are starting to be clarified by the employer. And I think this is where we need a much better relationship between the public and private partnership, where your school is working with local employers in terms of identifying what the competencies necessary for that individual to be hired as a supply chain professional. Well, we're in a period where anybody with a supply chain degree is going to get hired. We need to step up our game a little bit in terms of the competencies and capabilities necessary for a successful employee.
Right. So that's all I had. Do you have anything else? Any closing remarks? Any closing comments? Anything to share with the viewers?
Well, first, I appreciate this. This is a wonderful opportunity for us to share, some of the issues that collectively the industry is facing. More importantly, we hope that the current disruption is a memory sooner than later, and that we need to start preparing for I abhor the term new normal, because I don't know what normal is right now. And
right.
So as we start to pivot out of this disruption and start to focus on more long-term sustainable issues, that we do keep in mind that we are in a global environment, that what we do in the US does impact across the globe, and what happens in Africa, what happens in China does impact us here. Mm-hmm. And so I think much more awareness of the role and responsibility the supply chain has on our lives. We've seen both the positive and the negative challenges that supply chain has. It's time that we now start to develop the scenarios so that just in time is invested in at the same level as just in case. Mm-hmm. Right now, we are not as effective on the just in case as we are in just in time. And right. So we focused our efforts on an efficient, effective supply chain. Unfortunately, we don't have the agility to respond or the resiliency to respond to the various disruptions. We will probably not have, our hope is ever a disruption like this again, but we will have disruptions in the future. Right. And how do we prepare to be a resilient, responsive supply chain so that we can ensure patients and consumers alike that their needs and their wants are going to be met?
All right. All right, Abe, thank you for your time. And I'll be on the lookout for your emails, and always read them.
My pleasure, Justin. Stay safe and healthy.
Thanks, you as well.